Tell us another thing. So you're going after Obergefell, which I think, one of the problems in divorce, you've got all these big Christian law firms out there that will fight for your First Amendment right and other rights. They won't touch divorce, but they should want to go after Obergefell, and they should want to like help you in this situation. And then you said the other thing that we talked about. I know you have 12 of these. We're probably going to get to 4, but I'd like to get to at least 4. Then the second thing you said was the government. Well, it was government benefits, and then. And tell us another one. What's another thing you got on the list?
It starts off right now. So 6.001 fails to state a legally cognizable cause of action because the judge is supposed to be ruling over, has some discretion over your actions. What is the action? Insupportability is a state of mind. This is it's a subjective state of mind. So I can be sued because my wife or my wife can be sued if I'm the one doing it because I have a subjective state of mind that says things are insupportable. What did I do to make it insupportable? Give me some facts. If there are no facts to adjudicate, what am I even here for? So that's why the first thing we're trying to do is dismiss it, a motion to dismiss, because there's no legal cause of action. But the other thing is, and this is very important, is that this has now become a legislative divorce. It's a huge separation of powers issue. The way that the code is written right now, and I've had judges tell me this, and I've got a video on there on my YouTube channel where the judge says, I have to grant a divorce. And I said, no, you don't. It says you may. No, I have to. I have to follow the law. And so he's telling me I have to grant a divorce. I said, if I brought 20 witnesses there, would it make a difference? I don't know. He has to do it. So what they've done, the judiciary, which is supposed to have some type of discretion and actually weigh a legitimate legal matter, the legislature has already stated that the divorce will take place. Now we're just dividing up the assets and stuff like that. That is called the legislative divorce. Our Texas Constitution, Article 3, Section 5613, says that the legislature is forbidden from writing special laws granting divorce. And that's a huge separation of powers issues. Article 2, Section 1 talks about the separation of powers. The legislature is not allowed to create divorce on demand, and that's what they've done. So the special person, the person who is requesting the divorce, always wins on the merits, simply because he or she says it's insupportable. There is no defense. You can't stop it. Mm-hmm.
Question: If there was no marriage license involved and the two parties had signed or verbally created a covenant only in a church, maybe with a document that was filed, and there was only that document, there was no family court, no state involvement by a license, would it then go to the other person to grant the divorce?
So that's a very interesting question, because in Texas, we have common law marriages, and that's what they would probably try to put it under, as the common law marriage. However, it's interesting that you asked this question, Joe, because just today somebody sent me an article about a judge up in Collin County, and it was a Muslim lady wanted to divorce her husband, but she had signed a prenup, a Muslim prenup. So now the judge said, you need to go back to your religious authorities for this. So she wouldn't grant the divorce. Now,
that's awesome.
That creates a very interesting dilemma, because I already know what's going to happen in Islam. Like I said, as a missionary to Muslims, so I understand what's going to happen, what's going to not happen, unless somehow they've adopted and have now taken on the whole sexual revolution as well. But I forget what your original question was there.
I was pointing out, and this is something a lot of people don't recognize, is that when you get married, your marriage license doesn't attach you to your spouse. It attaches the married entity to the state. So if we get the state out of it, and the two people getting married then have the only enforceable arrangement is the covenant marriage that they're doing between them, and one of them wants to leave, it would make logical sense to me, under biblical law, that it would be the other person that would say, okay, you're free to go. You've denied, in other words, we go to 1 Corinthians 7 again. You've denied Christ. You're an unbeliever. You want to go. Bible says you can go.
Yeah. And what I would say about this is that this is fraud by the state, because I would say that if the state is issuing a marriage license, it should tell people this is a temporary marriage license until one person wants to leave. Because in the body of Christ, as a believer, as a pastor, you marry people. If people told you Pastor Jeff or Pastor Tim, hey, I want you to marry us. We're going to be married for 2 years, and I'm going to get a divorce. Would you marry them?
Nope.
Well, what about 5 years?
Nope.
How about maybe after 11 years?
Till death do you part.
Okay, that is the covenant that we make. The state has an actual legitimate policy interest to see people stay married. But when you get married, I believe it's complete fraud. The marriage license is fraud. By the way, Alabama has done away with the marriage license. Good for Alabama. But the
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide. Roll Tide. Roll Tide.
Yeah. But the thing is that if the state is not defending the institution of marriage, it's fraud. And I believe that if you're going to issue the license, that you should also have some type of duty to make sure that the people are maintaining that you just don't get divorced automatically.
U.S. Constitution mandates that the state defend contractual agreements. That would include covenants.
Yeah, well, that would include covenant.
Federal law, and they have an obligation under the supreme law of the land, i.e., the Constitution.
So it's interesting.
That's what the divorce. That's what the license does. It negates that. That's why they have the license.
So if you look at Article 1, Section 10 of the U.S. Constitution, it talks about the impairment of contracts, how that should not impair contracts. And there was a case that went back to 1819. It's called Woodward, the Board of Education or something like that Board of Education, Dartmouth Board of Education versus Woodward. I can't remember the exact title of it, but basically it argued contract law there. And this was for the contract that was actually created before the United States was formed. And, you cannot impair the obligation of contracts. And now the divorce attorneys will try to say, well, we now have Maynard v. Hill, and it tells us that marriage is more than a contract. It's a status, but it's not less than a contract. So you're absolutely right. And also the state constitution say the same things. They shall not impair the obligation of contracts, except marriage.
This is the abuse of the court system. So here's let's give the church some grace, because we're all the church, right? All of us here. We need a little grace. The church is sitting back doing church stuff, and these judges and these attorneys are changing the law. Our elected representatives aren't even involved in it. We don't know what's going on. There was no national debate when no-fault divorce rolled through the states.
Just like in Bolshevik
Russia. Where was the debate in the public square? It didn't happen.
Yeah. This was a designed social experiment to destroy our country. And if you go back to 1963, look at what was read into the congressional record. They talked about the Communist Party, I believe it was USA, read somebody actually read this into the congressional record about one of the things that communism wanted to do was to make divorce easy, painless. The march through the institutions, as Gromsky used to talk about it doesn't take place immediately. It takes place incrementally, an inch here, a foot there, a couple of more inches here, until finally we are living in a society that our founders never, ever envisioned. And as far as our protection as people of faith, people of God, they are non-existent. And I shouldn't say non-existent, but when it comes down to marriage, forget it. Doesn't make a difference. Oh, that's nice and convenient of you believing that little fairy tale.